I'm the independent chair of the inquiry into the Sheffield street tree dispute. Thank you again for joining us. Could you please tell us your name and your role?
Hi, I'm Councillor Joe Otten, so I'm currently chair of the Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee, which has responsibility for the highway maintenance contract, which includes obviously the street trees.
Thank you very much indeed, and thanks for coming today. I'm just going to tell you a couple of things to make sure you understand them that I run through with everybody. This is being live streamed and will also be recorded and then broadcast or made available for people to watch afterwards. You understand that, I think. And I think you also understand that we're not allowed in these discussions to say anything that might be defamatory or libelous or that brings into the public domain personal information about somebody which should be kept private. And if I worry that we're in danger of heading into that territory, I'll let you know. And if we don't solve the problem in extremis, which I'm not expecting it all to happen, we would have to curtail the hearing. But you understand all that?
Yeah.
Great. We've sent you a list of topics that we wanted to discuss with you, but let me give you a chance to say whether there's anything you'd like to offer by way of introductory remarks before we go through my little list.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I think possibly won't be covered, but I think it's worth understanding before the dispute quite how enthusiastic we all were about the PFI, to the extent that my group and the Labour group, as I'm Liberal Democrats, we were both kind of claiming as much credit as we could for the thing, and I think that possibly has some that has some bearing on how it then developed, because obviously if it's something you're claiming credit for, you want to take ownership of, you've got to see it in a different way to a contract that's imposed on you that you then say, well, okay, I'm not happy about it, but this is what we have to do. So and certainly in the early days, I remember raising quite early on members' questions in council about trees, and the cabinet member coming back to me and saying, how dare you question the removal of dangerous and diseased and dying trees? Clearly your party is against all this wonderful new highways contract we've got, and we're in favour of it. So that was the context, I think, that we came out of. I think it's worth reflecting on. The other thing I would reflect on is that I think where we are now in terms of the governance of the council, the committee system, that's very much comes out of the nature of the trees dispute. I think it's whatever party you supported in the city, if you felt that your local councillors didn't have a say because it was made in a cabinet, then obviously the attractiveness of saying a committee system, backbench councillors have a say on making the key decisions, that has an appeal. And I think quite possibly that would never have happened if we hadn't had the trees dispute. And I would reflect that if the council had engaged with that process, that campaign a bit sooner, it could have switched voluntarily to a committee system, and we'd have then more flexibility going forward. If we found it hadn't worked, we could change our minds. Now we're stuck with it for 10 years, and we can't change without another referendum. And it's, there's a lesson there about referenda in general committing you to courses of action, isn't there? I think I will say no more about
that. Okay, thank you very much. So let me just start by asking you to run through for us the positions and responsibilities you've held in the council relating to Streets Ahead and the dispute between 2012 and now, because I know you've had a number of different roles, not least in opposition as well as your current role.
Yes, so certainly during the bulk of the core investment period, I had a number of shadow portfolios. The council cabinet portfolios kept changing, but I generally had the one that included the highway maintenance. Sometimes it was transport and environment, sometimes it was something else, But that was only 1 year I think it had transport, but most years it had the street trees. So I was the shadow member, and I do remember items coming to full council and campaigners coming to full council in kind of the early days of it, where I think there was a petition debate at council, so I was the person to respond to it on that occasion. And I remember saying, look, and this is the line I've always taken. Sorry, I'm going ahead of myself. You wanted positions, so shadow cabinet member for most of the thing, and then I've also been on the police and crime panel. I'm not anymore, but I was for about 5 years on the police and crime panel. So I've occasionally raised questions there where policing came into it, which it did a few times. I was, they eventually changed the rules to stop me asking so many questions. So I guess they were the right questions to ask. I would argue in that case.
Okay, and you became chair of the current cabinet committee when? Just explain your current
Yes, so
responsibility.
currently, so after the elections in May, so we had, that's when the committee system came in. So last year it was a hung council, it was a Labour and Green coalition, then they had cabinet members, of which some were Labour and some were Greens. This year we don't have cabinet members, we have committees and we have committee chairs, and they partly in recognition, I think, of the new system, and that maybe this is what the people of Sheffield were asking for, but also I think because there wasn't a clear deal to be struck between any two of the parties. What we've ended up with is a three-party power sharing arrangement under a Labour leader, but with the committees shared out between all three parties. So as a Liberal Democrat, I have one of those committees, and that's the Western Street scene.
So your committee is politically responsible now for the Streets Head contract, and you're
Yes.
highly relevant to the piece of work I'm doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Our committee, which is, again, it's a politically balanced committee, so I'm only the chair, I have a Labour deputy chair, and then there are 3 Lib Dems, 4 Labour and 2 Greens on the committee, so you need 2 parties at least to carry any votes.
Okay, good, thank you. So, going back, when do you remember first becoming aware that there were significant objections to what was going on with the tree replacement element of the Streets Ahead contract?
So, I mean, I remember noticing. I remember first appreciating, I suppose, the extent of the tree removal, and that was an occasion I was driving through. I think it was somewhere near Hillsborough, and there was in the process of removing a great many large trees, and then they put in obviously a similar number of much smaller trees. And I thought, well, this has completely changed the character of this road. So I couldn't put a date on that, but I thought, hello, something's actually going on here. I mean, prior to that, representing a ward in the southwest, we didn't get very much work until later on. We had an early phase of the core investment of some of the main roads, so Aberdale Road South, and some of the roads coming off that. There's some main roads coming off that, and there were a handful of trees in that. And I do recall actually something wrong. Do you think these will be an issue, the trees? And maybe, I don't know. It wasn't at that point something to be conscious of.
Okay. Let me ask you a related question. Do you recall, or have you heard any discussion of the extent to which the tree element of the Streets Ahead programme was visible to members before the contract was signed or at the time the contract was signed?
No. The contract. I was first came on council in 2011 and in opposition, so I didn't really have much to do with that. Obviously, there was work on the development of the contract before 2011 that involved my group, but because I wasn't on the council, I didn't have any view of that. So I would have to say no. I would say no. I don't think there was much understanding or awareness of it. I think in the way that we understand it to have been described, that trees that are causing significant problems, or trees that are damaged or diseased, obviously that sounds quite reasonable that they come out. I don't think, even if you read the text, I think you might not have realised we're talking about large numbers of healthy trees here, and sufficient to change the characters of many roads in the city. Yes,
okay. Now, you went to some meetings of the Highway Trees Advisory Forum in 2015, I think, and I wanted to ask you basically your experience of that forum and why neither that forum nor other activities like the debate you had in the council or meetings you had amongst each other as politicians, why those things weren't successful in resolving the dispute in the early phases?
So, the forum itself, it was, an hour and a half or something. It could have gone on for 6 hours for the number of people there to make all their points and ask all their questions and get answers to half of them. So, it was, and it didn't. And the answer, the final answer would always be, and it would be from a highways officer or an AIM representative, it would be, well, we could do that, or we can't do that because it's not an acceptable engineering solution to this case. And that was always, it was the last answer. You could try and pick at that, and you couldn't get any further. And there were usually a couple of answers before that one. And so that was kind of the stone wall, I think. And you're not going to, it's hard enough in a briefing, and I have private briefings with officers as well, occasionally, to say, what can we, and usually about specific roads, specific trees. What can we do here? Can we not spare this one? And it's hard enough in that forum. You've got an hour and a half just talking to an individual to say, what can we do here? And some of those briefings were very useful and very illuminating. The officers were helpful, and then I learned lots of things about highway trees. But even in that forum, you can't get past that stone wall. To do it in a public forum with 60 people in the room, some of whom are very passionate and understandably very angry, and then you're also trying to bring in lots of different parties. No chance of getting past a stone wall like that.
Okay, let's then come on to how things panned out later in 2015, or the end of 2015 and through 2016. Before we'll come on to Rustings Road, so I'm not asking about Rustings Road in this question. But before that, in 2016, maybe you could just describe for me the position you were taking as an opposition council with some responsibilities in this area for your party on the debates, discussions that were taking place in the council. What was your view then?
So I think the point that I made at the time was that we have to appreciate that we are the customers here, that we, the council, are customers in a large, expensive contract, and that we are paying a lot of money. We're getting, obviously, money from the government as well to help it along. Paying a lot of money to get a service that we want. That's the logic of it. You don't pay to get services you don't want. And so the arguments that were kind of tied into this, were obliged to do it, they didn't fly for me. I said, well, look, surely we're the customers. We can negotiate. It's difficult to negotiate change. I was also advised, for example, that any change to the contract is £100,000 in legal fees before you've done anything. If you want to actually make a change, that's on top of that. So that's difficult. But look, we're the customers here. We value these trees. We don't value these trees over the exacting nature of some of the highway standards that were in there. So it's surely in our interests and in our power to be more flexible with the standards, and then therefore save a lot of those trees. Now, I was never save every tree. There has to be some proportionality to it. Some of those trees near the end of their lives anyway. Some of them are causing very severe problems. But we could have saved a great number of the perfectly healthy trees and not have the same sort of effect on the quality of our local environments. In short, by being flexible with standards. And I think that's kind of where the council ended up some years later. Yes.
Okay. No, I understand. And that was the line you were trying to argue at that time. So let's come on then to what happened in Rustings Road in November 2016. What were your reflections on the planning and delivery of that operation? How public reacted to it? Press reaction? There were some quite high-profile politicians commenting on it in the council chamber, outside the council chamber. Just tell me more about that.
It made the news headlines, not just in the UK. It made global news, didn't it? That was a terrible indictment on the council and the council's reputation. There's no hiding from that. It's to have a knock on your door in the small hours of the morning in the dark by an arm of the state is not the sort of thing you expect to happen in leafy southwest Sheffield. You might expect it in some parts of the world. And then, this is a point of which I pursued, not to actually know, to have both the police and the council blaming each other for some aspects of that, and neither taking responsibility of it. I think is still unacceptable. We have to know, if you do get woken up at 5 a.m, you at least ought to know on whose authority it's been done. So I just think the whole thing it's a shocking failure in terms of good governance and good respect. What kind of respect we ought to have for the citizens of Sheffield, and then to have trade union laws, quote, used against civic-minded pensioners trying to peacefully protest about something in their local community, being public-minded citizens. I think, again, grossly disproportionate. It's difficult to see how how that decision was made. And I'm intrigued who was in the room when that. We still don't know who exactly was in the room when that decision was made, and they should explain themselves.
Okay. Things then evolved. The dispute escalated, as you know, throughout 2017 and early 2018. What was your view, again, as an opposition councillor through that period? So, for example, did you have a view on the use of the injunction, committal proceedings, those kinds of things? Or what were you saying would have been a preferable approach through that period?
So I think during that time, the council was, the administration of the council, I suppose, the situation had become polarised, hadn't it? It had become so polarised. And I recall having a briefing with an officer responsible for this, who previously I'd had many briefings with before and been perfectly fine, and he came into the room. The body language was completely different. He suddenly didn't want to tell me things that he would normally have just told me because he associated me, I think a little bit unfairly, but he associated me with the campaigners. I was never part of that group. But I had some contact with them, and I was sympathetic to their cause. So, and that's just a out of character kind of thing for in terms of the council between officers and members. So I think that was really damaging, and it made it harder to reach a resolution. And the committal proceedings against Councillor Cllr, I mean, again, I'm baffled as to how that was ever thought to be a good idea for anybody to do. So yeah, I had no sympathy with any of that. And I think I can only imagine that nobody, either officers or members within the administration, kind of stepped back and looked at the bigger picture and what are we doing here? What are we trying to achieve? But they were in the bunker, and they were being attacked. And I've got a lot of sympathy for to the AMI workers and the council officers who personally felt personally attacked, as did many of the campaigners. But that's that's what happens, isn't it? When you get a polarised dispute like this, and you get security brought in, and you get accusations on both sides, some of which are correct. I mean, it's tragic and it's unfortunate, but. But yeah, but it tends to encourage the formation of the bunker attitude, and they're having a go at us and it's not fair, and we've just got to fight back somehow.
Okay.
And I think that's where it was.
Yeah. And maybe you want to make the same point again, but then things got escalated further in early 2018, and some of the confrontations on the streets of the city reached a new height. There were escalating measures taken. I don't know if you want to say something about how you felt during that period.
No, I think I've made the point. Forgive me, I may have strayed out of your time windows. I'm not clear exactly when all these things happened.
Okay, it's
a test of memory. But yes, I mean, there is I can understand, I can appreciate there's a tradition of non-violent resistance, isn't there? And it always comes up against if it's resistant enough to the use of force by the authorities. And I suppose I did feel that really, and it's never the case, but my sympathy, perhaps my political history, is sometimes the protesters deserve as much protection from the police as the authorities do, and it never really quite happens. And I think that's probably the case. And this time that they deserved a little more protection than they were getting. But you can understand the police also have a job to do, and they also have people going about their lawful business and injunctions to enforce and so on. So I recognise the difficulty of the position they're in.
Okay. So let's move forward now and pick up the new structures after the 2021 referendum. Let me just firstly ask you, what was the link between the street tree dispute and the fact that there was then a referendum and the people of the city voted for a different way of being governed? What was the link between those two things, in your opinion?
So, in my opinion, it was very much that the administration, and that was the council leader, the cabinet member, and other cabinet members potentially, were seen by the people not to be accessible even via their local Labour councillor. You could talk to the Labour councillor for their ward and get a sympathetic ear, but that the council still carried, and obviously you could talk to opposition councillors and get a sympathetic ear, but the council carried on. And so this sense that the cabinet system, that it's only these handful of individuals and not your local council making the decisions, is the problem. And I mean, I don't know if this is exactly what happened. I did mention to one of the tree campaigners once that the 2012 Local Communities Act, there's an act in 2012, had this provision for a referendum to require council to go back to the committee system, or allowed councils voluntarily to go back to the committee system. And so it's possible that that's what kicked it off. It may all be my fault.
Okay, but in your mind, there was a clear link between the dispute over street trees and the campaign for the referendum.
I think there was. I mean, it's not entirely the same people, but I think there's a logical step. If you look at the timing of it and how it developed, there's a connection there. And I do think the council should have listened to that campaign for a committee system and tried it out rather than waiting and letting it go to referendum.
And you made that point earlier on how things might have. There may have been more flexibility now had that been the path chosen. You made that point earlier.
Yes.
So, now, as part of the new committee system, you chair the committee which has political responsibility in this area. So how do you see the set of issues you're dealing with in that committee now? What are your priorities? What are the issues you're grappling with?
So, I think that obviously the Street Tree Partnership we're probably going to come on to, aren't we? Their work is key to a lot of this. My personal frustration, I think, is with some of the outstanding roads that weren't dealt with and that were left over. We got a petition at our first meeting. We got a petition on Sheldon Road come to us, and we went out, a number of members of the committee, local councillors, council officers and Amy people, and we walked up and down the road and we looked at a design that could be implemented there, and there was some feedback on that, and I was kind of hopeful that by the end of the year we'd have had some progress on it, and that's not happened, and it's immensely frustrating, because the condition of the footways on that road are terrible. If you try and get a wheelchair down there, you're really going to struggle. And then actually in one case the tree has got so wide that there's the width for a wheelchair, never mind the ramping of it. So that's an immense frustration. And I've told officers and whoever will listen, look, I'm quite happy to have a decision come to the committee. And the point of the committee system, if I'm right about in my earlier argument, is that these decisions can be made in public and on a cross-party basis, and we can take responsibility for it, and it's not one councillor in a dark room. So I'm quite happy for that decision to come to us to do something on Sheldon Road, whatever it is. But I can understand why it hasn't, and it's not. Partly, there's a number of factors to that. I don't know if you want me to go into those. And partly it is. I think the partnership is obviously working on some of the details, and they still have some work to do on that. I mean, the partnership isn't just about the street trees or even the outstanding street trees. It has a lot. It's done a lot of things, a lot of kind of public realm improvements they look at, and all sorts of things. So they've done a lot of good work, but they've been asked. What they've been asked to do is quite a monumental task, really, in terms of solving what was a political dispute within the city in a kind of non-partisan, non-political way. But there are also other, the current performance of Amy against the contract and delivery is also not what it ought to be, and so that is also impacting on these outstanding roads. So those are, I'd say, the main two things.
Okay.
And so, offering to make a decision, is not. If that would solve it, I would do it. But I don't think that's actually that's not the obstacle at the moment.
Okay. So let's talk a bit more about the partnership. What's your view of the partnership and the adequacy or otherwise of the support it receives from the council and from Amy?
So I've been to a meeting. I observed a meeting of the partnership early on in my term. The steer I got was not to keep going. They didn't want to be have councillors present. They didn't want to be partisan figures present. I get briefed by Nikki Rees, who's been mentioned, who's the council officer lead on the partnership. And I've not had a request come to me for more support. Certainly, if I get one, I'll look favourably on it. I think the challenges. So my understanding, but again, it's second hand, of the challenges the partnership face are, the amount of time that people can give to it, because they're all volunteers, and the amount of work that they have to do, because we're asking an awful lot of them. So I think if we got more volunteers with more time, maybe we could move faster. But I'm certainly happy to give them more support and anything I can to help. And I do think, obviously they're bringing together people who were involved in the dispute. They're bringing together people who weren't, but had other responsibilities. And reaching a consensus is a difficult process. And I'm quite happy, as I've said, to say if it helps. Look, the committee's there ultimately we have to make a decision on policy. I'm quite happy to take a decision at my committee and to take advice from the partnership or a recommendation from the partnership. And if they don't agree, then two options of which we have to decide between. That's I feel that's our job.
Yes.
But I'm not going to do that if they feel they're making progress.
Yes.
And I'm just going to, it's blundering into a carefully crafted compromise. That's the dilemma, I think.
Yes,
for
I
me.
understand. I don't know if you heard the conversation I had earlier today with Nathan Edwards.
I heard most of it, yeah.
And I understood him to say there are resourcing issues for the partnership, not least, but including levels of support from Amy on a variety of points. Also a bit of scale of council staffing available, which you've alluded to and Councillor Fox alluded to as well. I just wanted to give you a chance to say anything else you want to say to me about what you heard from Nathan.
So so I had a conversation with Nathan, and actually not that recently. I've not spoken to him recently, but I'm quite happy to pick up the phone. I've been following my steer and letting them do their job. But I think I recognise the challenge with Amy in that they are delivering less than the standard in all sorts of areas, and I don't know if we're going to come on to the future of the Amy thing.
Well, I'm happy to hear from you on that, but let's come on to that.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
deal with the other point first, then we'll come on.
Yeah. Okay. So I recognise that as a challenge. There are aspects, and as I understand it, part of the problem with Sheldon Road is getting the support and the information. Although Amy did go away and do a design that they were asked for Sheldon Road, so I thought we were further on than we are, but I don't know exactly what now the problem is. But I think there are technical reasons, technical information that is needed. I fully recognise that, and we have the same challenge. We have Amy coming to the Waste and Streets Committee this month to give us their plan to get back on track in terms of delivery. So and to face questions about that. So we will give them a grilling on this point as well as the others. But you know, that they have their own problems. They're going through a sale at the moment. We're hoping that it will come out of this with a you know, a well functioning highways contractor, but you know you can't guarantee that.
Okay. So come on to what you would like to say about this kind of rest of the contract. I mean, the broad question from my point of view is, what concerns do you have or challenges do you foresee for the future, bearing in mind there's another 15 years to run of the contract, and how any risks that you can see in the future can best be minimised?
Yes, I mean, stepping back for a moment, it's when we signed the thing, when the council signed the thing, when it was being negotiated, you know, everything was PFI. You know, it started in the noughties under the Labour government, and it's, you know, if you wanted money to do something, it had to be a BFI, or you didn't get the money. And there is a logic to it. There is a logic to saying, well, let's put the risk in the private sector. Let's have the private sector manage some of the relationships with people who might want to dig up the roads, and some of that has worked very well. Some of it hasn't. There is a logic to doing that, but the price that comes with a contract that's this big, and you know, a lot of flexibility, and you know, potentially, and some, you know, some PFI contracts have been excessively expensive. I don't think the evidence is that this one has. I think it's just you know, struggling to deliver. So 10 years later, the gloss has gone off PFI in general. The gloss has gone off this one in particular, in that the delivery is not what it ought to be, and that we had all this problem with the trees, and you know, more flexibility might have saved us some of that pain. But we are kind of stuck with it. The cancellation. Potentially, you know, there is a termination process that we could engage, but there are, you know, it's not straightforward by any means, and there are going to be downsides to that, and there are rights that they have to, you know, put improvement plans in place and you know, find other contractors and do all sorts of things that they would. So it's not, you know, people ask me, why don't you just cancel it? And the answer is it's not that simple. I think we also ought to reflect that actually before we had the contract, yes, we were spending less on our roads when we did it in house, but that wasn't delivering at all well either. You know, we could allocate money to something, the money would get spent, but the job wouldn't get done because whatever, there was a reason, something went wrong. And we didn't have a client type relationship where if we paid for something we could expect to have it with our own in-house highways team. So let's not look back to the past and think we had something better then. We had something worse beforehand, even though the gloss has come off the end of the contract. And putting aside the trees, I think it's still something I would want to claim some credit for.
Yes.
Not least for the standards of the roads are much better than they were.
Yeah.
Not least that we got substantial amounts of money coming in from the coalition government to fund it. I think it's still something that I would want to claim credit for rather than distance myself from.
Yeah.
Putting aside the trees. So I think, you know, for better or worse, this is where we are. We are going to end up with better roads over the next 15 years than most places, but we are going to end up spending more money than most places over the next 15 years as well. And most of the money we're spending now is servicing the debt from the core investment phase that's already happened. So we can't really have complaints about that, because we had roads in a terrible state and we got them up to a much better standard.
And of course, a lot of the money you're spending on that's come from central government anyway. So
a lot of it, yeah, absolutely.
But you're having to contribute from your own resources too. Yeah. Okay. So, standing back with the benefit of hindsight, what do you think might have been done differently, by whom and when?
So I go back to my point about being the customer and being flexible with the standards. Right at the start, I think because there's a great big contract, and because there's actually more than two parties to it because of the financing arrangements, it's the first line of defence to objections about trees coming out was the one I alluded to earlier, where I can't remember the time I said I was against the nice roads, and his party was in favour of it. But the second line of defence was, well, we're tied into this; it's an obligation. And I just think you have to step back and say, no, but what does this contract, what purpose does it serve? What direction is the purpose of that contract is create an obligation that is in one direction from Amy to us. And yes, there are lots of little obligations in there, but that's, standing back, that's what it is. And so it has to be an obligation that we, in hindsight, think is a good one. And there's a process for negotiating a change to it. So that absolutely had to be the thing. And I'm not clear why that didn't happen, except that, obviously some people may have had the view that we don't care about the trees so much, and we do want nice flat roads. It's going to be a great asset to the city, and nice flat pavements. Or that they were tied into thinking on a more piecemeal way. Okay, we've got obligations too. That's not how it works when you're paying a great deal of money for something. It really isn't. Yeah. And I think the council realised that in the end. It could have just realised that a lot sooner.
Yeah. Okay. What impact? You've probably heard me ask other people this, but I'm interested in your view on what impact the dispute had on the city, and what lessons have been learned or should have been learned.
So, I mean, being international news for wanting rid of trees is terrible for the city's reputation. I mean, on the back of that, we've maybe been able to say some good things about some of the good things we are doing with trees. Some of the rebuttal is numbers of tree plantings, outside of highways. You can say, we're replacing all the trees. As I've said all along, look, every tree is going to get replaced. And there is an issue there. I think, again, in hindsight, there is an issue with, yes, smaller trees are often more appropriate for the highway, but they're not as good as large trees in terms of canopy cover. And so if it's a smaller species, maybe the replacement has to be more than 1 for 1. It has to be 2, 3, 4 for 1, whatever the number is. But I'm digressing. Your question, your question was...
What you've touched on it. What impact the dispute had on the city?
Yes, so it's huge reputational damage to the city, and also I think it gave us the committee system we have, and whether that actually delivers in terms of more broadly the kind of decision making people want, I think still has to be seen. I mean, you go to a committee meeting as a member of the public, and you will probably see all the reports that are on the agenda get passed unamended, and there you go. Is that really very different? I think we're still working out, as a council, some of the details of how that ought to work. So, and I've lost my thread slightly. The impact on the city. And I do think that the political culture of the city, I think the political makeup of the council has changed. I think we're in a period of Conservative government where normally Labour councils hang on and hold on to their seat, hold on to their majorities, and the Labour council here has lost its majority, partly to ourselves coming back from a low point, but also from the Greens taking off in the central parts of the city in large numbers. I think absolutely that is a result of that. So a hung council and a committee system, I think are both outcomes of the trees dispute, because frankly Labour dropped the ball.
Okay. Any other lessons you think have been or should be learned?
So I mean the obvious thing to go is, well, look, PFI isn't the flavour of the month anymore, and I'm slightly wary now, because I did hear Terry Fox earlier say, well, I've just called off or postponed a large contract. I think he's referring to the leisure strategy. I don't know, he may be referring to something else. The leisure strategy, was agreed, is about finding a partner to operate leisure centres on behalf of the city. And there are organisations out there that do that and do it very well. And so I hope we don't go down the route of saying let's do everything in-house, because in-house is sometimes the right thing, but it's not always the right thing, and it's not always going to be the best value. And the housing repair service has been poor since it was insourced, and the tenants damp with. Constituent just the other day with an urgent repair problem that his particular health needs made it urgent, and he wasn't getting an answer. So let's not go. I hope we don't learn the lesson of saying let's do everything in house.
Yes.
And I would repeat what I said earlier, that the highways are still better than they were before we had this contract. And it's not just the government money; it's the. I mean, I spoke to some AMI workers early on who transferred over from the council, and what they said was that they were more effective and efficient, and therefore they got more satisfaction out of their work, and they were happy, the culture of the organisation, and it was a positive message. It's not, oh no, we've been farmed out to the private sector and they're all terrible people, the private sector, aren't they? It wasn't that at all. So I hope that we understand that, and that we don't think, well, everything has to be in house. That would be a mistake. But PFI, the massively complicated contract as a concept for delivering a hospital or a school or a public service, that is not the flavour of the month anymore, and I think that is the lesson that's been learned. We only got this money from the government, I think, because it was somewhat experimental, and we were taking this experiment because we had this particularly bad road things, and I hope we keep on having experiments, but the next one has to be something different.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to tell me?
No, I think I've covered it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, Charles, that's it.